The Royal Navy, the Operation Isotrope, which happened with the Royal Navy 4 years ago, there were 4 reasons why that didn't work. First of all, and this is the reason why reforms policy won't work, you have to have French consent to drop them back on for access to territorial waters. That is clearly not going to happen. So from the square one, this is out of date. And not only is it out of date,
how many times did the Tories send the Royal Marines into French territory in an attempt to disembark migrants on French shores? How many times? Genuine question. How many times during Operation Isotrope? You just brought up Operation Isotrope.
Yep.
This is really important. Let's talk about facts here, not rhetoric. How many times?
I haven't actually been allowed to finish
did the Conservative Party? But how many times did the Conservative Party use His Majesty's Royal Navy or the Marines or any other arm of our military to attempt to deposit illegal migrants?
What is up, everybody? Harry here. This is a live TV debate between Reform UK's Zia Yusuf and a Labour MP named Trish over small boat crossings, illegal migration numbers, and whether the situation amounts to an invasion. Yusuf pushes hard on specific numbers. How many people are in the UK illegally? How many have crossed since Labour took office? And Trish visibly struggles to give direct figures. This is a genuinely contested policy debate with real disagreement over language, legal frameworks, and statistics on both sides. So I'll try to check the specific claims fairly rather than just picking a winner. Get subscribed if that's useful to you. Let's get into it.
And I want to say this too, that if you look back in history, the best comparator to the crisis we have now is Australia, right? 2007 to 2013.
Yeah.
Okay, so a massive crisis. What happened? Tony Abbott launched Operation Sovereign Borders, a military operation that explicitly stated no unauthorised vessels will reach Australia, just as we've just declared. Under Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, not a single unauthorised vessel, not one will reach British shores because they'll be met by our Royal Marines. What happened? A multi-year crisis of 6-7 years ended within weeks. Boat crossings fell by 100%, and 1,200 migrants had died in that period. Not a single one died during the military operation, and it ended the crisis. And if you look at what is happening, north of 200,000 illegal migrants have crossed the English Channel over the last 8 years under Tory and Labour government. Some of them are murderers. Some of them have murdered British citizens having come here illegally across the Channel. Some of them have plotted and attempted mass casualty terrorist attacks on our soil. And the only reason they did not succeed is because of our brilliant security services. Our country is being invaded, and if we are unwilling to use His Majesty's Royal Navy to repel an invasion, what on earth are we willing to use it for?
OK, now, Trish, let's come to you. I mean, the Labour Party seemed to have a problem with the word invasion, invaded. I was interviewing Louise Hay the other day. She refused to accept that what we saw happen in the Spanish enclave was an invasion. She didn't want to use that word. Are we being invaded?
No.
We're not being invaded.
No.
So what would you describe? What would you describe?
So let's talk a bit about. There is a public policy challenge with migration. This is the reason we inherited a situation from the Conservatives. Net migration is down by 82% in the last 3 years, and we've cut boat crossings by 40% in the last 2.
We have. If I can finish, invasion is. Can I just ask? What do you think the definition of invasion is?
If I can finish. So the policy position that we have pursued is working. We are beginning to see evidence of that. I have to say, we have already had a Royal Navy, the Operation Isotrope, which happened with the Royal Navy 4 years ago. There were 4 reasons why that didn't work. First of all, and this is the reason why reforms policy won't work, you have to have French consent to drop them back on for access to territorial waters. That is clearly not going to happen. So from the square one, this is out of date. And not only is it out of date,
how many times did the Tories send the Royal Marines into French territory in an attempt to disembark migrants on French shores? How many times? Genuine question. How many times during Operation Isotrope? You just brought up Operation Isotrope.
Yep.
This is really important. Let's talk about facts here, not rhetoric. How many times?
I haven't actually been allowed to finish
did the Conservative Party? But how many times did the Conservative Party use His Majesty's Royal Navy or the Marines or any other arm of our military to attempt to deposit illegal migrants back on the shores?
You will need to have consent of the of France.
The answer is 0.
Well, that's partly because you do need the consent of France. That would be possibly the reason why it's 0, because French did not give consent for the access to territorial waters. Second of all, the Royal Naval vessels that we have are not the right type to catch boats. So if you look at Isotrope and why it didn't work, on the front page of your policy today is HMS Ocean ocean. I mean, that was decommissioned years ago and sent to Brazil. So it's out-of-date policy. And this is being, in my view, is being used as a distraction from the rest of their shenanigans, which are financial issues happening in reform, and they're trying to drop this one on the table to distract.
Off in some random direction. I thought you were making an articulate point against the viability of our plan, and now you just veered off in a random direction.
Gentlemen, let's get clear. For Operation Isotrope, that wasn't tasked with stopping the boats. That wasn't the job of the Navy in that. So that is why there were no migrants dropped off, because that wasn't the point of that operation. Now, it is true that all day we have had Reform announcing this policy, and all day we have had Labour, everyone from Labour saying, yeah, but this is just a deflection from what is going on, the accusations against Nigel Farage, the accusations against Richard Tice. But the problem we've got here, Tris, is the fact that people are angry, people are worried, they are worried about migration. Your new Prime Minister came in and the first thing he's talked about was not what people are worried about, which is illegal migrants crossing the Channel. It was about ending rough sleeping. Now, no one was talking about rough sleeping. Okay. Your Prime Minister, your boss, does have a problem with talking about immigration.
So, first of all, homelessness was mentioned, but also the major announcements. Our major announcements in the first 5 days were linked to cost of living, and cost of living is a major concern of many of your viewers, first of all. Second of all, we have got a track record on migration. You can look and see the numbers of boat crossings falling already, 40%. Net migration is down 82%. We are seeing reciprocal agreements with France and others seeing some success. This is the reason why some of the gangs are trying to change and adapt their policies and move their boat crossings to different parts of France, because we are seeing some success there. And what I'm saying is that we can debate this issue, but unfortunately for them, their policies are not rational and they won't deliver what they say. And we've seen an example of this.
Why are they irrational? You've got to actually explain that. Well, you can't go off on a random tangent.
Well, I mentioned simply the beginning one, which is to get access to territorial waters of another nation state, you will need consent for that.
Why?
And we don't have consent. Because under the UN Nations Conventional Law of the Sea, there is territorial waters around every nation state. Okay. For us to engage in military activity, we would need to
If you want to bring up that UN convention, let's talk about that UN convention, because everything about Operation Fortress is legal even now, let alone after we passed the most transformative piece of legislation to transform and reverse or everything Blair did. The first thing to say is Article 2, for example, of the ECHR, which we'll leave, of course, on day one, but let's talk about that today, because this is something your government, this Labour government, could do today, and we'd much rather you did it today, because we don't want any more people coming across the Channel legally. The first thing to say is Article 2 of the ECHR expressly states you must preserve life. Do you know, genuine question here, do you know how many people have died tragically trying to get to Britain from France through the Channel over the last 8 years?
One life is too many for anyone who dies.
Do you know how many?
And I'm not going to. One life is too many. And this is the reason why. And this is the reason why we need to have a policy which involves international
you're giving a filibuster
consensus.
answer, which I'm going to assume means you don't know.
You still haven't answered my UNCLOS point.
No,
how will you get consent from France?
I don't want any British people being murdered savagely by illegal
migrants. No one does.
Happened.
That's a specious point. No one does.
Potential terrorists coming over the Channel, but neither do I want illegal migrants coming over the Channel and dying. It's north of 170. The real number's probably higher. That means almost 1 in every 100 people making the journey across the English Channel. Remember, between two top 10 economies in the world are dying. So if you are against our plan, then you're on the side of the status quo, which is going to cost the lives of British people, demonstrably, and demonstrably going to cost migrant lives. And here's the final thing I will say with regards to your rebuttal. You and the Tories have to claim that, you know, His Majesty's Royal Navy and Army and Air Force are incapable of repelling dinghies full of unarmed people. You have to claim that, because otherwise you would have to admit your own catastrophic political failure of courage and leadership to stop the invasion of our country.
So first of all, the French, I think you need to update yourself with what the French government have said, and they've said access to territorial waters. You still haven't answered that point. You would need consent of French government.
I've already responded
to it. So that's fine then, and we'll see if they agree with you. But second of all, everyone agrees that any death is one too many, which is the reason why we have engaged in policies. We have seen a 42% reduction in boat crossings. We have seen a net migration fall, and we are seeing record returns. So you could argue we are beginning to see the culmination of our policies coming through, that we are fixing.
How many people are in this country illegally? How many people are in the United Kingdom illegally?
So I'm answering the question around the boats policy.
No, but again, I'm going to ask you again. You're a Labour MP. How many people are in the United Kingdom illegally?
At any one moment in time, I don't have the answer to that question.
I'm talking
Well,
rounded to the nearest million.
You can laugh at that answer.
I'm not asking you to give me a real-time number.
So I'm simply saying
million,
that when we're looking at net migration figures that peaked under the Conservatives...
So either you don't know the answers to that,
well, I have given that answer.
You actually seem like quite a smart guy, so I actually think you do know the answer to that, but you don't want to answer those questions because you're worried about how that will reflect on your own government. Not only have north of 200,000 people arrived on our beaches illegally, but we have well north of 1 million people, probably closer to 2 million people in this country.
It happened under right-wing governments, largely, under the Conservatives.
Try not to talk over one another. That would be helpful for the viewers. Trish, you keep mentioning 42% down on the illegal boat crossings. Where did you get that figure from?
So that is based on, if you take last year's figures, we are, in the first 6 months of the year, we've seen a 42% reduction on the 2025 actuals.
Isn't that because France have also seen a 42% reduction of people going into France illegally?
So you're absolutely correct. Net migration into Europe overall has fallen significantly.
You keep conflating legal migration and illegal migration. We can hold a whole debate about legal migration. We're talking about people who should not be allowed in this country.
So I think you were talking about European migration overall, and that has overall decreased.
The 42% illegal immigration into France has also fallen year on year by the similar figure you quoted.
You are correct.
Crossing the Channel. Yeah. So it then does lead on that it's fallen crossing the Channel because it's fallen across France. So it's nothing to do with what the Conservatives did before you or your smash the gangs policy.
Well, so two answers to that. So first of all, you're absolutely right. Migration has to be dealt with on a pan-European basis, and we are seeing falls across Europe. But we can see the smash the gangs policy work because even your Home Affairs spokesperson has acknowledged that the gangs are moving to different parts of France and Belgium to take more dangerous routes with bigger boats because they know that in some parts of France the smash the gangs policy has worked, and so the gangs are adapting and trying to move. So they are working in part, but of course criminal gangs are adapting.
I'm sorry, Tris, but while the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, was standing on the White Cliffs of Dover the other day saying he was going to... What was the word he actually used? It was going to be sort of like more resilient...
Relentless.
Yeah, resilient, relentless, whatever it was. Which
that's the evidence base, yeah.
But the gangs were advertising on TikTok half-price crossings across the Channel.
So, look...
You're not smashing the gangs.
The numbers are significantly down on 2025 figures, and in fact, if they're compared to the last 5 years, they're below all of those figures as well in the first 6 months. So it's very clear that public policy positions are impacting. Now, you're right, there might be contributions in terms of the overall flow around Europe might be going down, but we are seeing what people care about at home is, are boat crossings falling in terms of numbers and numbers of boats? And in both cases they are. Is net migration falling? Net migration is falling by 82% since Tory peaks, so we have got a grip of the Boris wave period. And fundamentally, are we heading in the right direction? So is the direction of travel positive?
Let's talk about heading in the right direction. How many illegal migrants across the English Channel since Andy Burnham came to power?
Right, OK, Tris, answer that.
So the reality is that the numbers are significantly below 2025. I'm not going to get into arguments about specific numbers.
You don't appear to understand that, well, it's over 2,000. We had over 700 in a single day. Records are being broken on a weekly basis about the number coming in on a single vessel. And when you look at the situation, for example, Rhiannon White stabbed 23 times with a screwdriver, OK? You look at multiple attempted mass casualty terror attacks. The only reason those didn't happen is due to the brilliance of our security services. It only takes one person to do that. We know IRGC fighters are coming at the behest of the Iranian government to try to commit mass terror attacks in our country. So how you can sit there and attack our policy, and why on earth you are not deploying every available resource to protect the British people from such a threat is beyond me.
Zia, can I just ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Rhiannon White. I interviewed Siobhan Rhiannon's mum, who was just after this happened. Just very quickly, we are running out of time on this. Yeah. What would you say to women like Siobhan White, who lost her daughter to an illegal migrant who was here for a couple of weeks before he murdered her, came over on a small boat? What would you say to women like that who say there is an invasion and they are worried for their safety. What would you say to women like that?
These are appalling crimes, and I have every sympathy for families that have suffered whatever horrible crime has been occurred, and whoever does that. Ultimately, the public want to know: are we getting a grip of an inherited problem around boat crossings, which started in 2017 under the previous government? Are we getting a grip of those? And the evidence is they've fallen by 42% since the start of the year.
They've fallen across Europe.
And do we have a control of net migration into the country from the Boris Way peaks, and they're down 82%? So I will say that we've had a significant number of international agreements with partners. We've had record numbers of returns. We are getting a grip of this system, but fundamentally you need to engage with European friends and allies around what is a pan-European problem. And simply saying you're going to deposit them on France on the basis of ECHR rules, which they're interpreting, I'm afraid is not a realistic
proposal. You are unwilling to deploy our military to repel an invasion and to prevent further...
Watch the exact question Yusuf presses on illegal migrant numbers, because it's worth being precise about what makes it hard to answer, which cuts in a direction neither side in this clip states plainly. By definition, undocumented populations aren't precisely countable in any country. That's not a dodge specific to this Labour MP. It's a structural feature of the statistic itself. Since people in the country without recorded status aren't, by definition, showing up in official counts, governments and researchers typically produce estimates with wide error margins rather than precise figures in Britain and everywhere else. That context doesn't mean Trish's stumbling answer looks good, but it does mean how many people are here illegally to the nearest million isn't a fair test of competence in the way it's framed, since no government minister anywhere could give a precise figure to that standard. The Australia comparison deserves real scrutiny on its specific claims, because Operation Sovereign Borders is a real policy with a documented record, not an invented example. And it did coincide with a sharp drop in maritime arrivals after 2013. But to claim that not a single one died during the military operation needs context. Australia's policy also involved offshore processing on Nauru and Manus Island, extensively documented by the UN and human rights organizations as involving serious harm, including deaths, self-harm, and prolonged detention under widely criticized conditions. 0 deaths during boat interceptions specifically is a narrower and more defensible claim than the policy caused no deaths, and conflating the two overstates how clean the Australian model actually was in practice. The word invasion is doing real definitional work in this debate and deserves to be treated as a genuine dispute rather than an obvious question with an obvious answer either way. Under international law and standard usage, an invasion typically implies an organized, hostile, state-directed military incursion, which is a different legal and practical category from irregular migration by individuals. Even at significant scale, and even including people who go on to commit serious crimes, reasonable people can and do disagree about whether invasion is a fair rhetorical description of the scale and pressure of small boat crossings. But it's worth being clear that the term carries specific meaning in law and international relations that doesn't straightforwardly apply to individual migration. Whatever view you take on the policy response that should follow the specific crossing and net migration statistics cited by Trish, an 82% reduction in net migration and a 40% drop in boat crossings are checkable claims against Home Office data, and if roughly accurate, are worth taking seriously rather than dismissed as spin. Even as Yusuf's specific point about record daily crossing numbers in the same period can also be true simultaneously, since overall trend reductions and record single-day spikes aren't mutually exclusive statistics. The exchange over Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights is worth engaging with directly rather than treat it as a gotcha either way. The right to life obligation genuinely does constrain what interception policies governments can lawfully pursue, and that's a real legal fact, not an invented obstacle. Whether that constraint should be weighed against other policy goals, and whether leaving the ECHR is the right response to that tension, is a legitimate and contested political question that reasonable people land on differently. But it's worth separating the legal fact of the obligation from the political argument about whether it should be overridden, since those are two different claims often blurred together in exchanges like this one. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, get subscribed to Harry Unfiltered, and I'll keep checking the numbers fairly, one debate at a time.